All right, so we're gonna start talking about APRV. So APRV stands for Airway Pressure Release Ventilation, which actually explains what the mode is all about, right? It's airway pressure release ventilation, which means that you have an airway pressure that is high, that is released every once in a while. So the chest goes like this. And then, right, for a short period of time. Forget about the bilevel that we use here. Just think APRV now. Just erase the memory and let's start from the beginning, because I want to start with you with the classic APRV and tell you how do we arrive at bilevel. Right, so the need for APRV started about 25 years ago or something. So I was playing with APRV 25 years ago. So message to tertiary care centers. This is not a new mode of ventilation. It's been there for a long time, right? The need for it started when we had pressure controlled ventilation. That's what pressure control waveform looks like. And an inverse ratio. So when somebody has a severe hypoxia, we put them in an inverse ratio and paralyze them. And when we paralyze them, we're limited. We can't paralyze them for 1 day, 2 days the most. If you paralyze more than 2 days, then they'll be very weak and they need a trach. You know, they're going to be extremely weak. So the dilemma starts when somebody is still need the paralysis, still very hypoxic at the end of 2 days. What are we going to do? So somebody had to come up with a mode of ventilation that will maintain the long I time here without the need for paralysis. So this is the waveform, pressure waveform for APRV. It looks like this. And when we talk about any mode of ventilation, you know that we have to talk about set parameters, dependent parameters, and waveform. So we'll start with the waveform. This is how it looks like. Much longer inspiratory time, which we call here the high time, than pressure control, and much shorter compared. So the ratio is much more inverse. But this doesn't need paralysis, and this needs paralysis. Why? Because in this one, you can breathe on top of it. You can breathe here, you can breathe here, you can breathe here. Here, you can't. So if you're awake or you're not paralyzed and you want to breathe, it's 2 seconds. You know, nobody can hold. I mean, nobody wants to hold themselves for 2 seconds, for example, without breathing on top of an inspiratory, especially if the patient is tachypnic, sick and tachypnic. So they want to breathe, and if they want to breathe, they see that they're like they suffocated. They feel suffocated because the vent is not assisting them or even opening a valve for them to breathe on their own. This one here allows them to breathe on their own. So despite having a looks like obnoxious settings, it actually requires less sedation than pressure control. So that's I'm gonna say multiple claims to fame for this mode. So the first claim to fame is that it will maintain a high or very long I time without the need for paralysis. And the second claim to fame, and you can count with me, that it requires less sedation, because the patient doesn't feel this that much. It's just for a long period of time the patient is like this. You can breathe in the middle as if it's just a high peep, you know, as if I just put him on the high peep and he's breathing completely at his will. And then it releases every once in a while. That's annoying, a little bit of, and goes up again. It's just, okay, what's happening here? Maybe this, I don't know what this release is all about, but every time, you know, but for the majority of the time is at that peep, right, that he's just breathing over. So that's much more comfortable. So let's talk now about the set parameters. So the first thing is low pressure from here to here. And that ranges between 0 to 5 centimeter water, which is very low. And the second thing is the high pressure, which is from the top here all the way down to 0. And that ranges from 25 to 35. And then from here to here, and that's the high time. And that ranges between 4 to 8 seconds. And then from here to here, that's the low time, and that ranges between 0.3 to 0.7 seconds. Very short. This is obviously very long. All of the settings that I wrote on the board here are startup settings. So they are settings that you start with, but you can deviate from this as you're weaning the patient. You can go 10 seconds, 12 seconds on the high time, for example. In addition, there is also a pressure support. You can support each one of the small breaths with a pressure supported breath, and the pressure support ranges usually between 0 to 10. And then there is the FI2. So how many set parameters we have for APRV or bilevel? 6. high pressure, low pressure, high time, low time, pressure support, and FiO2. How many for SIMV? 5. How many for pressure control? 5. How many for volume control? 4. The reason I'm saying that is that when you move to another hospital, it doesn't have the asterisks. You know the asterisks? That you have to fill this cell, or another hospital that you write with your own hand the settings. You don't want to miss settings like this, because one setting, for example, can kill the patient if somebody does it incorrectly. And I'll show you. I'll show you how that can happen. All right. Now the dependent parameters. So this is the set parameter. Dependent parameters are tidal volume, spontaneous tidal volume, also respiratory rate, mean airway pressure. All of these things are dependent parameters.